The desert is quiet now. Stone breathes under starlight and the Great Pyramid casts a shadow older than memory itself. You're not here by accident, traveller. Something in the long rhythm of time has guided you to this moment, to these stones, to this question. What if the story we've been told for 5,000 years is only the surface of something far deeper? Consider this: the Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy modern instruments still struggle to match, and its chambers trace a pattern mirrored in the stars of Orion and frozen as they appeared in a forgotten age. Not a myth, but a measurable precision, as geometry that whispers intention. Was this monument a tomb or a message? Listen closely now. Let's drift a little deeper. The desert breathes differently at night. When the heat withdraws and the wind stills, the Great Pyramid of Giza no longer feels like an object built by human hands, but like a presence that has simply always been there. Stone absorbs moonlight without reflection, as if remembering every sky it has ever seen. In these hours, history loosens its grip, and the familiar story begins to feel thinner, more fragile, like a surface explanation laid gently over something far older and heavier beneath. For nearly 5,000 years we have been told a story designed to be understandable, a single ruler, a single purpose. A monumental tomb raised by determination, organization, and simple tools. It is a story that fits neatly into textbooks and timelines, offering closure instead of questions. Yet the longer one sits with the pyramid itself, the more that story begins to feel less like a conclusion, and more like a placeholder waiting for something braver to replace it. You're not here by accident, traveller. No one listens to these questions by chance. Something subtle pulls the mind toward unsolved things, towards structures that resist explanation. Perhaps it is curiosity, or perhaps it is memory, something inherited, something ancient responding quietly when confronted with stone that does not behave the way it should. The pyramid does not ask for belief, it asks for attention. Measured carefully, the Great Pyramid reveals an unsettling calm precision. Its base is leveled within fractions of an inch. Its sides aligned true north with accuracy that modern surveyors still find uncomfortable to replicate. This is not the imprecision of early trial and error. This is deliberate geometry executed at a scale that magnifies even the smallest mistake into catastrophe. Error should be obvious here. Instead, we find restraint, discipline, and control. When engineers speak of this structure, their voices often soften. They use phrases like unexpected, difficult, and improbable. These are professional ways of saying that the math works, but the story does not. 2.5 million blocks were placed not merely to stack upward, but to lock together into a coherent system, one that distributes weight, channels force, and preserves internal voids with astonishing foresight. Gravity itself seems to have been consulted. I remember nights spent with instruments humming faintly, dust settling on notebooks, calculations repeated. Not because they were wrong, but because their implications were unsettling. Numbers are honest. They do not exaggerate. When numbers imply intention beyond the accepted narrative, it is the narrative that trembles, not the math. The pyramid's measurements do not argue. They wait. Stone, when shaped crudely, remembers violence. It chips, fractures, resists. Yet inside the Great Pyramid granite, one of Earth's hardest materials, bears surfaces so smooth and cuts so controlled, they resemble the output of modern machinery more than the marks of hand tools. Drill cores curve with consistent radius. Cuts stop cleanly, without hesitation. Copper tested under modern conditions fails quickly against such material. Physics does not bend for tradition. This is where discomfort enters the room. If tools do not match the results, then either the tools were different or the story is incomplete. Mainstream explanations often lean on effort. More workers, more time, more willpower. But effort does not replace technology. Strength does not substitute precision. You cannot wish stone into behaving differently than it does. Light presents another quiet anomaly. Deep within the pyramid's narrow passages there is no soot, no residue, no trace of flame or oil. Torches leave memory behind. Fire always does. Yet the walls remain clean, as if illuminated by something that did not consume oxygen, something that left no chemical signature. Absence in science is often louder than presence. What if illumination came from a source we no longer recognize? Not magic, not fantasy, simply a method lost forgotten or rendered unnecessary by catastrophe. History tends to assume continuity, that knowledge once gained is never truly lost. Yet geology tells a different story. Ice ages arrive, oceans rise, civilizations reset, memory fractures. The Sahara itself remembers this. 12,000 years ago, this land was not desert, but savanna shaped by rain and rivers. Water once carved the rock here slowly and relentlessly, long before wind and sand took over the task. Erosion patterns around the Giza Plateau do not whisper of dryness, but of prolonged rainfall. Time, it seems, has been edited. Erosion is not destruction. It is time thinking aloud. It records what happened when written language did not yet exist, when memory was stored in stone and soil rather than symbols. When erosion contradicts historical timelines, it is not being rebellious, it is being precise. Astronomy deepens the unease. The pyramids align not only with Earth, but with the sky, specifically with the stars of Orion. This alignment does not correspond to the sky as it appeared during the reign of the pharaohs, but to a far older configuration when Earth's axial wobble pointed the heavens differently. Around 10,500 BCE, the belt of Orion mirrored the layout of Giza with uncanny accuracy. This is not symbolism alone. It is celestial mapping. Precession is slow. It unfolds over tens of thousands of years. To encode it into architecture suggests long-term thinking that exceeds a single lifetime or even a single civilization. It suggests planners who thought in cycles, not generations. Builders who understood that the sky itself moves, but predictably like a clock that measures epochs instead of hours. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved quickly. Some are meant to be lived with. The pyramid has endured ice flood and empire. It has been claimed, repurposed, and reinterpreted, yet it never explains itself. It simply remains a fixed mass in a moving world, as if daring each generation to ask better questions than the last. There is no urgency here. No need to force conclusions. The universe is not in a hurry. Silence, after all, is the universe thinking. In that silence, the Great Pyramid stands as a reminder that human history may not be as young or as simple as we have been taught to believe. Tonight, as you listen and drift deeper, let the questions remain open. Not every mystery is an invitation to conquer. Some are invitation to observe, to accept uncertainty, and to rest within it. It is all right to not understand. Evidence rarely arrives with certainty. More often it accumulates quietly, like dust settling on forgotten instruments, like numbers repeating themselves when no one is watching. In the case of the Great Pyramid, evidence does not shout that something is wrong. It simply refuses to align with the story we have been repeating for centuries. The deeper one looks, the more the official narrative begins to feel less like a conclusion and more like a convenient stopping point. We are told the pyramid was built as a tomb, yet it behaves nothing like one. Royal tombs in Egypt are unmistakable. They overflow with inscriptions, spells, carvings, offerings, and names etched repeatedly into stone. The Great Pyramid offers none of this. Its walls are silent. Its chambers are undecorated. There are no prayers for the afterlife, no declarations of divine lineage, no treasures left behind for a king's journey beyond death. Absence again becomes a form of data. If a structure is meant to glorify a ruler, it usually does so loudly. Names are repeated until memory becomes permanent. Yet inside the Great Pyramid, Khufu's presence is nearly invisible. No confirmed burial chamber, no body, no funerary equipment. Only stone and space arranged with deliberate restraint. One must ask gently, without accusation, why would a civilization so devoted to ritual leave its most important monument so strangely empty? Archaeology often relies on inscriptions to anchor timelines. Words fix events. Names assign ownership. But here inscriptions appear late, faint, and questionable. Marks attributed to workers were discovered long after the pyramid had already been entered and altered. Their authenticity remains debated, their timing inconvenient. Writing when found where it should not be does not automatically clarify. Sometimes it complicates. Evidence also resides in proportion. The pyramid's internal chambers are not randomly placed. They form a system angles, shafts, voids, and corridors aligned with careful intention. These features are not necessary for a tomb. They are excessive for storage. They feel purposeful in a way that resists a simple explanation. Systems imply function. Function implies understanding. Granite blocks weighing tens of tons were transported from quarries hundreds of kilometers away. Even today, moving such masses requires specialized equipment, reinforced roads, and precise coordination. Ancient explanations rely on ramps, sledges, and manpower, yet no physical evidence of such massive infrastructure remains. Ramps large enough to build the pyramid would rival the pyramid itself. Their disappearance would require a clean-up as impressive as the construction they supposedly enabled. Physics offers no comfort here. Friction force and material limits cannot be persuaded by tradition. Calculations suggest that the effort required to move and place these stones using proposed methods approaches the edge of plausibility. Not impossible, perhaps, but strained. When explanations stretch this far, they begin to thin. Precision compounds the problem. The casing stones, now mostly gone, once fit together so tightly that a blade could not slide between them. Thermal expansion was accounted for. Load distribution was anticipated. These are not accidental outcomes. They suggest builders who understood material behavior deeply, not intuitively but systematically. One begins to notice a pattern. Where the pyramid should show signs of improvisation, it shows planning. Where it should reveal brute force, it reveals finesse. Where it should display symbolic excess, it offers mathematical restraint. These are not the fingerprints of a rushed burial project. They resemble something closer to engineering. Inside the pyramid, sound behaves strangely. Acoustics respond in ways that modern researchers still test with uncertainty. Vibrations linger. Frequencies resonate. Stone chambers hum faintly when stimulated. This does not prove purpose, but it raises questions. Structures designed without awareness of resonance rarely behave this way by accident. Light once more refuses to cooperate with the standard explanation. Narrow shafts extend upward at angles too precise to be arbitrary. Some align with specific stars, others with solar events. Their dimensions would have made navigation nearly impossible during construction without illumination. Yet there is no evidence of flame, no smoke, no residue. The darkness inside the pyramid feels intentional, controlled, as if light was invited only where necessary. When confronted with such anomalies, institutions tend to retreat, not out of malice but out of habit. Academic systems reward stability. They resist narratives that threaten foundational timelines. To suggest that the pyramid predates known civilization is to unsettle not only archaeology but history itself. Entire chronologies would wobble, certainty would erode. Gatekeeping often emerges quietly framed as protection. Protection of heritage, protection of method, protection of reputation. Excavations slow, permissions narrow, questions are postponed. Silence grows. Yet silence is not neutrality. Silence shapes what is remembered and what is forgotten. Hidden chambers deepen this unease. Robotic exploration revealed sealed doors, copper handles, passages that lead nowhere and everywhere at once. Each discovery raised anticipation, and each was followed by delay. Drilling revealed more stone. Stone revealed more silence. Requests for continued exploration were denied or postponed indefinitely. Curiosity was met with caution. Muon radiography pierced the pyramid without touching it, using cosmic particles born far beyond Earth. These particles mapped voids invisible to traditional methods, revealing a massive hidden chamber above the Grand Gallery. Its size rivals known spaces. Its purpose remains unknown. No entrance, no explanation. Only confirmation that the pyramid still holds secrets. Science celebrated the discovery briefly, then fell quiet. Exploration stalled. The void remains unentered, suspended between knowledge and ignorance. A space proven to exist yet forbidden to understand. This is a peculiar place for science to stop. Evidence taken alone rarely convinces. It persuades through accumulation. Here accumulation presses gently but persistently against the accepted story. Each anomaly may be dismissed individually, but together they form a pattern that refuses to be ignored. Patterns are where science becomes uncomfortable. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence is not physical at all. It is cultural. Ancient Egyptian civilization appears suddenly fully formed. Architecture, mathematics, astronomy, symbolism all arrive together without a clear developmental trail. Cultures usually grow gradually, skills evolve, mistakes accumulate. Yet Egypt emerges with confidence as if inheriting something already refined. Inheritance implies predecessors. Predecessors imply loss. Loss implies catastrophe. Ice ages do not negotiate, floods do not archive. When civilizations fall, they do not always leave ruins. Sometimes they leave knowledge embedded indirectly in myth, in ritual, in stone, that survives when people do not. The Great Pyramid may be less a beginning than an echo, a structure standing at the edge of remembered history carrying forward techniques whose origins were already ancient when it was repurposed. Perhaps it was not built once but used many times, modified, restored, reinterpreted. This does not diminish ancient Egypt. It expands it. To inherit knowledge is not weakness. It is survival. It suggests continuity across resets, memory carried forward in fragments preserved by those who understood that stone remembers longer than stories. As we weigh this evidence, there is no need for alarm, no need for fear. The pyramid does not threaten humanity's place in history. It humbles it. It reminds us that intelligence is not linear, that progress is not guaranteed, and that forgetting is as natural as learning. In the end, traveller evidence does not demand belief. It invites patience. Some mysteries resist resolution, not because they are guarded, but because they are layered. Tonight the universe whispers again, and it says gently that understanding is optional. Observation is enough. Anomalies are not errors, they are signals. In science, an anomaly is the moment when reality stops cooperating with expectation, when the universe clears its throat and reminds us that our models are provisional. The Great Pyramid is filled with such moments, quiet interruptions in the story, where we thought we understood subtle deviations that accumulate until certainty begins to soften. I learned early that instruments do not lie, but interpretations often do. Late nights in laboratories teach patience. You repeat measurements not because you distrust the data, but because you distrust yourself. With the pyramid, repetition only sharpens the unease. Every angle measured, every mass calculated, every alignment verified, returns the same calm message: this structure behaves as if it were designed by minds deeply fluent in physics. Consider orientation. The pyramid's sides face the cardinal directions with extraordinary accuracy, deviating by mere arc minutes. This precision implies not just observation, but correction and ability to account for error and adjust accordingly. True north is not obvious to the naked eye. It must be derived, averaged, refined. It requires time, method, and knowledge passed between careful hands. Time itself becomes an anomaly here. Construction timelines suggested by traditional accounts compress effort into improbably short spans. 20 years, one lifetime. Millions of blocks placed with consistency that tolerates almost no mistake. Human labour can be immense, but human coordination has limits. Fatigue accumulates. Skill varies. Yet the pyramid maintains uniformity as if built under conditions immune to chaos. Inside, granite tells its own story. Granite resists shaping. Its crystalline structure punishes imprecision. Yet drill holes curve smoothly. Cores emerge with consistent diameter surfaces reflect intent rather than struggle. These are not marks of desperation, they are signatures of control. The stone appears persuaded, not forced. Attempts to replicate such results using proposed ancient tools have consistently failed. Copper deforms. Abrasives slow progress to impractical rates. This is not an argument from disbelief. It is an observation grounded in material science. Tools leave signatures. These signatures do not match the hypothesis. Then there is the absence of soot. Fire, when used extensively, leaves scars. Smoke blackens ceilings. Residue embeds into pores of stone. In the pyramid's passages, nothing remains. Not a stain, not a trace. Darkness feels preserved, as if illumination came without combustion. Anomaly does not accuse. It simply waits. Sound behaves oddly as well. Frequencies resonate within certain chambers, amplifying vibrations in ways that feel intentional. Researchers describe standing waves, subtle hums, responses that suggest careful dimensional planning. Acoustics is not intuitive. It requires calculation, experimentation, foresight. Rarely does it emerge by accident at monumental scale. Water leaves deeper questions. Geological evidence around the Sphinx points to prolonged rainfall patterns inconsistent with desert erosion. Rounded contours, vertical fissures, stone softened by time and water together. These marks imply a climate long gone, one that predates accepted Egyptian timelines by thousands of years. If water shaped the Sphinx before dynastic Egypt, then something existed here earlier, not a temporary camp, not a passing culture, but a society capable of monumental sculpture planning and symbolism, a civilization comfortable with permanence. Civilizations do not emerge fully formed. They experiment, they fail, they iterate. Yet Egypt appears suddenly sophisticated, as if stepping onto history's stage already knowing its lines. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture arriving together mature and confident. This is not impossible. It is simply unusual. Astronomy offers another anomaly. The Orion correlation does not demand belief, only consideration. The pyramids reflect the belt stars not as myth, but as geometry. The alignment corresponds to a sky configuration far older than dynastic Egypt, a time when precession placed Orion differently above the horizon. This alignment required knowledge of slow celestial cycles, spanning tens of thousands of years. Precession is subtle. It unfolds patiently, almost invisibly. To encode it in stone suggests a worldview that embraced deep time, a culture that thought beyond generations, beyond dynasties, beyond individual lives. This is not impossible, but it is rare. Hidden chambers intensify the sense of anomaly. Gantenbrink's door, copper handles sealed behind limestone passages ending deliberately rather than collapsing accidentally. Each discovery hinted at intention, then receded into silence. Exploration paused. Permission evaporated. Curiosity met administrative gravity. One scans confirmed what stone refused to reveal: a vast void above the Grand Gallery, large enough to matter, too large to ignore, yet still untouched. Proven, measured, and then left alone. Science usually moves forward when discovery occurs. Here it hesitated. Hesitation itself becomes data. When curiosity stops at the threshold of proof, something other than evidence is at work. Institutions do not like anomalies that threaten structure. Timelines are delicate ecosystems. Alter one assumption and entire frameworks must be rebuilt. But anomalies do not vanish when ignored. They accumulate quietly. They wait. Gravity, after all, is patient. It does not argue. It simply continues pulling. Some suggest the pyramid was built atop older foundations, reusing and refining what already existed. Others propose that knowledge survived. Catastrophe passed through myth, ritual, and fragments of practice. A reset does not erase everything. It distorts. It fragments. It leaves echoes. Global myths speak of floods, fire, sky, changes, gods who taught and then departed. Myth is not data, but it is memory wearing poetry. When geology, astronomy, and archaeology begin to echo similar themes, it becomes difficult to dismiss them all as coincidence. The anomaly, then, is not a single fact. It is convergence. Independent lines of evidence bending toward the same uncomfortable suggestion. Human history may be longer, more fragile, and more interrupted than we prefer to believe. This realization need not frighten us. There is humility in recognizing that we are not the first to wonder nor the last to forget. Knowledge rises and falls like tides. Civilizations, like stars, burn brightly and then fade, leaving radiation behind detectable long after the source is gone. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves. Not physically, but conceptually. A reminder embedded in stone that intelligence once reached heights we no longer remember how to climb. In the end, observer anomalies are invitations. They ask us to slow down, to listen more carefully, to accept that certainty is not the goal. Understanding can wait. Tonight it is enough to notice the questions and let them settle. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. Silence is often misunderstood as absence, but in science it is frequently a presence. It is the quiet that follows a measurement when the result does not fit expectation. the pause before a theory is revised or quietly set aside. Around the Great Pyramid, silence gathers not as emptiness but as pressure. The more we learn, the more carefully, words seem to retreat, leaving stone and shadow to speak on their own terms. For decades, exploration at Giza has moved unevenly, advancing in short bursts before settling back into stillness. Discoveries appear, briefly illuminated, then wrapped again in procedural quiet. Permissions narrow, excavations pause. Questions linger unanswered, not because they lack merit, but because answering them would require reopening foundations long considered settled. Silence in this sense becomes a method. Institutions prefer continuity. Academic frameworks are delicate architectures, built atop assumptions that support one another like stones in a wall. Remove one and the structure must be rebalanced. Suggest that the Great Pyramid predates accepted history, and suddenly geology, anthropology, astronomy and cultural chronology must all renegotiate their relationships. Silence offers stability where inquiry might introduce collapse. I've seen this dynamic many times, not only in archaeology but across scientific disciplines. When anomalies accumulate faster than explanations, research slows. Funding redirects. Conversations become cautious. No one forbids curiosity outright. It simply finds fewer doors left open. Silence is rarely enforced loudly. It arrives softly, wearing the language of protection and patience. At Giza, silence is reinforced by authority. Control over excavation determines which questions may be asked physically, not just intellectually. When exploration stops at sealed doors and hidden voids, the pyramid itself becomes a closed system observed from the outside, but rarely allowed to reveal what lies deeper within. This restraint is often justified as preservation, yet preservation without investigation risks freezing knowledge in place. Silence also emerges culturally. Public narratives repeat familiar stories because they are comfortable, because they offer closure. The image of ancient workers hauling stones under a blazing sun is easy to imagine, easy to teach. It reassures us that monumental achievement fits neatly within human limits. To suggest otherwise unsettles not only history but identity. National pride complicates the quiet further. Egypt's monuments are not merely archaeological sites. They are symbols of continuity, heritage, and sovereignty. To imply that their origins extend beyond known civilization introduces uncomfortable ambiguity. Who built them then? Who inherits that legacy? Silence again becomes a stabilizing force. Yet silence does not erase evidence. It only delays interpretation. Geological markers remain etched into stone. Astronomical alignments persist regardless of debate. Precision measurements continue to return the same results. The pyramid does not adjust itself to match our explanations. It waits. Within its chambers, quiet feels deliberate. Sound softens. Air cools. Footsteps echo briefly, then vanish. It is the kind of silence that feels structured as if the space itself was designed to absorb noise. Some researchers have noted how sound behaves here, how frequencies linger and dissolve. Whether intentional or incidental, the effect is unmistakable. Silence becomes part of the architecture. Hidden spaces amplify this feeling. Voids confirmed by Mune scans exist, without entrance, without explanation. They occupy measurable volume, yet remain inaccessible, like thoughts acknowledged but never spoken. Their presence suggests that the pyramid still holds chapters unread content that resist completion. Silence here is not ignorance. It is suspended knowledge. Time contributes its own quiet. Thousands of years compress into stillness when viewed from geological scale. Dynasties pass quickly. Climates shift slowly. The pyramid spans both, standing as a mediator between human impatience and planetary patience. It has witnessed floods, desertification, and cultural reinvention without recording commentary. Its silence is not indifference. It is endurance. In long nights of study, I have learned that silence often precedes understanding. Before breakthroughs, there is hesitation. Before new models emerge, old ones are quietly questioned. The Great Pyramid seems to exist perpetually in that moment, after doubt has begun but before consensus can follow. Some argue that silence protects truth from speculation. Others suspect it protects narratives from disruption. Both may be partially correct. Yet silence has consequences. When inquiry pauses, imagination fills the gap. Myths proliferate, extremes replace nuance, balanced investigation guided by evidence rather than fear becomes harder to sustain. Still, silence is not inherently hostile. It can be an invitation to slow down, to listen rather than conclude, to accept that some structures were built not to be fully understood but to endure. Not all knowledge demands articulation. Some exist simply to remind us of scale. The pyramid's silence suggests that it does not belong exclusively to any one era. It bridges epochs carrying fragments of intention forward without explanation. Perhaps its builders understood that meaning would shift, that certainty would fade, that future observers would bring their own questions. In this sense, silence becomes generosity. It leaves room. I often think of silence as gravity in narrative form. It pulls interpretation inward, forcing us to confront what we do not know rather than what we assume. Around the pyramid, gravity feels stronger. Assumptions weigh more heavily. Conclusions sink slowly. Tonight, as you listen, let the silence remain intact. There is no need to fill every gap with theory or belief. The universe is comfortable with unanswered questions. Stars burn without explanation. Black holes hold information without revealing it. Silence is not failure. It is a state of waiting. Some mysteries wait, others watch. The Great Pyramid does both. It stands quietly at the edge of human history, absorbing attention without yielding resolution. In that quiet, it offers something rare, permission to rest within uncertainty. It is all right, listener, to let the silence settle. Let it slow your thoughts, soften your expectations, and remind you that understanding is not always the destination. Sometimes silence itself is the message. There are moments in long study when the past feels less like a sequence of dates and more like a landscape partially submerged. Peaks remain visible, monuments, myths, alignments, while vast valleys lie hidden beneath the surface. The Great Pyramid seems to rise from one of those submerged regions, a remnant of an epoch that history remembers only in fragments, as if time itself chose what to keep and what to drown. Geology speaks quietly but persistently about this forgotten epoch. Stone records climb it with impartial honesty. Around Giza, erosion patterns suggest prolonged exposure to water, not the brief seasonal rains of dynastic Egypt, but sustained rainfall over centuries. This implies a different world, one where the Sahara was green, where rivers ran, where dunes now sleep, and where human presence would have followed water as it always does. This world did not vanish gently. At the end of the last ice age, Earth changed quickly. Ice sheets melted. Sea levels rose. Weather systems reorganized. Cataclysm in geological terms does not require drama, only momentum. Floods erased coastlines. Settlements near water disappeared. Knowledge tied to those places vanished, with them leaving only indirect traces behind. Civilizations living through such transitions would not leave neat records. Survival narrows attention. Memory compresses. What remains afterward is rarely complete. Stories become symbolic. Skills are simplified. Architecture is reused rather than reinvented. A forgotten epoch does not announce its end. It dissolves into silence. In this light, the sudden sophistication of early Egypt feels less miraculous and more inherited. Mathematics appears already refined. Astronomy arrives already confident. Architecture emerges already monumental. These are not the traits of a culture learning from scratch, but of one adapting knowledge it did not originate. Inheritance, however, is rarely acknowledged by those who inherit. Myths often preserve what facts cannot. Across the world, ancient cultures speak of earlier ages destroyed by flood or fire. They describe teachers who came after disaster bringing wisdom, measurement, and law. These stories are dismissed as allegory, yet they persist with remarkable consistency. Myth, perhaps, is memory filtered through survival, carrying meaning when detail is lost. The Great Pyramid fits uneasily into a short timeline, but comfortably into a long one. Its scale suggests access to organization beyond trial and error. Its precision implies training rather than improvisation. Its alignment to celestial cycles suggests observers who track the sky across generations, or who inherited records spanning millennia. Instruments do not remember their makers, only their calibration. The pyramid feels calibrated to Earth, to Skeeter time itself. It is not flamboyant. It does not celebrate conquest or lineage. It is restrained, almost reluctant to speak, as if built by people who understood that permanence outlasts explanation. One wonders whether the pyramid was not constructed in a single, cultural moment, but layered across them. Foundations older than faces, techniques refined rather than invented, restoration mistaken for creation. History written later compresses this complexity into a simpler narrative because simplicity travels better than uncertainty. Consider the Sphinx weathered by water long before desert winds claimed it. If it predates dynastic Egypt, then Egypt did not begin its story on bare stone but among relics already ancient. Living beside monuments whose origins were uncertain, Egyptians may have inherited reverence without understanding. Restoration becomes reinterpretation. Memory reshapes itself. This pattern is familiar in archaeology. Sites are reused, repurposed, renamed. Each culture leaves its imprint, then moves on. Over time, attribution shifts. What survives is what fits the current story. What does not fit is quietly ignored. The forgotten epoch recedes further not because it lacked significance, but because it complicates identity. I've often thought of time as a tide. It advances, retreats, and advances again, never returning exactly as before. Civilizations rise like sandbars, briefly visible, then submerged. Occasionally a structure stands firm enough to remain exposed across cycles. The Great Pyramid appears to be one such structure anchored deeply enough to withstand repeated resets. If so, its builders may have understood impermanence better than we do. They may have known that their world would not last, that knowledge would fragment, that memory would thin. Stone becomes a message precisely because it survives when stories do not. Geometry outlives language. Alignment endures when names fade. This does not require advanced technology in the modern sense, only continuity of observation and accumulated skill. A civilization attentive to cycles, climatic, celestial, geological, would plan differently than one focused solely on generations. It would build for recurrence, not permanence, for survival of meaning, not ownership. The forgotten epoch may not have been global or unified. It may have consisted of networks, coastal cultures, knowledge centers scattered across regions now submerged. Their disappearance would leave little trace beyond anomalous artifacts, sudden cultural leaps and structures that appear out of place in short chronologies. The pyramid's silence makes more sense within this context. It is not hiding a secret. It is surviving one. It carries forward the residue of a world that did not make it through the last great transition intact. We encounter it not as contemporaries, but as distant inheritors, attempting to reconstruct what was never meant to be remembered fully. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not physically, but conceptually. It moves in the discomfort we feel when evidence refuses to align neatly. It moves in the humility that arises when timelines stretch beyond comfort. It moves when we realize that forgetting may be as fundamental to humanity as remembering. This realization does not diminish us. It situates us. We are not the first to build to measure to wonder. We are part of a longer experiment conducted by Earth itself, an experiment in intelligence, adaptation, and loss. Each cycle leaves behind fragments for the next. As night deepens, the idea of a forgotten epoch invites rest rather than anxiety. It suggests that uncertainty is natural, that gaps in knowledge are not failures but features of deep time. The universe does not insist on comprehension. It allows observation. In the end, Traveller, the forgotten epoch is not a missing chapter waiting to be recovered intact. It is a reminder that history breathes unevenly, that progress is not linear, and that some truths persist not because they are recorded, but because they are embedded in stone, waiting patiently for those willing to listen. Every system that endures long enough eventually resets, not by intention, but by accumulation. Pressure builds quietly until balance fails, and when it does, the release is sudden, irreversible, and indifferent to what it erases. The planet itself is such a system. Ice advances, seas rise, climates reorganize, and what once felt permanent becomes provisional. Against this scale, civilization is fragile no matter how refined it believes itself to be. A reset does not arrive as myth suggests with fire from the sky, or gods announcing judgment. It arrives as physics. Glaciers melt, water expands, coastlines retreat, storms intensify, patterns shift. For those living through it, there is no grand narrative, only adaptation, loss and survival. Memory narrows. Complexity becomes a burden. Knowledge that cannot be carried is abandoned. At the end of the last ice age, Earth experienced such a reset. Sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the oceans. Coastal settlements where human innovation most often concentrates were erased. What survived did so unevenly, leaving inland fragments disconnected from their origins. Civilization did not end everywhere at once. It fractured. This fragmentation explains much. It explains why advanced knowledge appears suddenly in some regions without clear developmental trails. It explains why myths of floods appear across continents. It explains why architecture and astronomy seem inherited rather than invented. A reset does not annihilate intelligence. It scatters it. The Great Pyramid begins to look less like an anomaly and more like an anchor. Anchors are not always the oldest objects in a system, but they are the ones tied most deeply into stable ground. If earlier structures were coastal timber-based or earthen, they would not survive rising seas and shifting climates. Stone placed inland on bedrock stands a better chance. In this sense, the pyramid may represent continuity rather than origin. A structure designed not to inaugurate a civilization but to preserve something through instability. Its geometry is not decorative. Its mass is not symbolic excess. It is resilience. I have often thought about how knowledge survives catastrophe. It does not travel intact. It compresses. It simplifies. Complex instruments become ritual objects. Mathematical relationships become myth. Observational records become symbolic stories. What remains is not instruction, but orientation. Perhaps the pyramid was meant to orient not just to Earth's cardinal directions, but to time itself. Alignments with stars that return predictably, cycles that persist regardless of human memory. Precession continues whether we record it or not. Orion rises again whether civilizations watch or forget. Stone aligned to these cycles becomes a reference point across resets. This does not require the builders to foresee disaster in detail. It requires only awareness of impermanence, a recognition that climates change, that societies fail, and that memory erodes faster than stone. Builders who understood this would not prioritize explanation. They would prioritize survival of signal. Signal survives best when it is simple, robust, and independent of language. Geometry qualifies, orientation qualifies, mass qualifies. The Great Pyramid speaks in these terms. It does not instruct. It indicates. Resets also explain cultural resistance to alternative timelines. Accepting that civilization has reset before implies it can reset again. This is not a comforting thought. It undermines narratives of linear progress and inevitable advancement. It suggests vulnerability rather than mastery. Silence becomes a defense against that realization. Yet the planet does not negotiate. Orbital cycles continue. Ice responds to insolation. Water responds to temperature. Gravity responds to mass. The same forces that shaped past resets remain active. Understanding this does not require fear. It requires humility. Instruments today are more sensitive than ever. We detect cosmic radiation from ancient explosions. We map sea level rise millimeter by millimeter. We track Earth's axial wobble with extraordinary precision. And yet, despite all this knowledge, we remain subject to the same planetary rhythms as those who came before us. The pyramid's endurance becomes instructive here. It did not resist the reset by force. It accepted it. It was built to endure change, not prevent it. Sand buried it. Wind exposed it. Time passed. The structure remained. Civilizations that build only for prosperity disappear with it. Civilizations that build for instability leave deeper traces. The difference is not technology, but perspective. A reset-aware culture thinks differently about permanence. one begins to wonder whether the pyramid was not a single, purpose structure at all, but part of a broader strategy, one that included knowledge preservation through multiple channels. Stone for geometry, myth for memory, ritual for continuity. When one fails, another survives. This layered approach mirrors natural systems. DNA encodes information redundantly. Ecosystems distribute function across species. Resilience emerges from diversity, not rigidity. A civilization aware of resets might mirror this logic intuitively. From this perspective, the absence of inscriptions inside the pyramid feels intentional. Language changes too quickly. Names lose relevance. Symbols decay into misinterpretation. Geometry does not. Orientation does not. Mass does not. Silence paradoxically preserves meaning by avoiding distortion. The reset reframes everything. The pyramid is no longer an impossible project squeezed into an unlikely timeline. It is a survivor of a long one. A structure standing between worlds, between a forgotten epoch and a remembered one. You can feel this when standing near it at night. The silence is not empty. It is weighted. It carries the sense of something that has already seen civilizations come and go. Something that does not rush to explain itself because explanation was never the point. Tonight, as you drift further into this story, let the idea of reset settle gently. It is not a warning. It is a reminder. The universe does not demand permanence. It allows recurrence. Some mysteries are not failures of knowledge, but records of survival. The Great Pyramid may be one such record, a stone memory left behind by people who understood that history does not move forward forever, but turns pauses and begins again. Sleep traveler. The cosmos has reset before. It will reset again. And still, something ancient will remain quietly keeping watch. An echo is not a repetition. It is a distortion shaped by distance, surface, and time. What returns is familiar yet altered, softened by everything it has passed through. When listening closely to the Great Pyramid, one begins to sense that it is not speaking directly to us, but reflecting something older, an echo of intention carried forward through ages that no longer remember the original voice. Civilizations leave echoes rather than records when their continuity is broken. Writing decays, languages fracture, symbols drift. But proportions endure. Alignments endure. Stone remembers even when people forget. The pyramid feels less like a message addressed to a future audience, and more like a resonance left behind something meant to persist without explanation, allowing each era to hear what it is capable of understanding. I have felt this echo most strongly in moments of stillness. Long nights when instruments are silent, when calculations are complete and doubt remains. There is a peculiar humility that arrives when evidence no longer advances understanding but deepens mystery. The pyramid does this repeatedly. It answers questions by replacing them with quieter, heavier ones. Sound behaves differently inside its chambers, as if the stone itself is listening. Vibrations linger longer than expected. Frequencies overlap, then dissolve. Some researchers describe these effects clinically, others poetically, but all agree that the experience feels intentional. An echo requires boundaries. Someone decided where those boundaries would be. Echoes also appear culturally. Ancient Egyptian mythology speaks of a first time, a sacred age when gods walked the earth and established order. Afterward came restoration, repetition, renewal. These are not the myths of a civilization inventing itself, but of one remembering fragments of something lost. Memory, when incomplete, becomes ritual. The pyramid may belong to that remembered age, not as a product of myth, but as its source, a physical anchor around which stories gathered. Over time, meaning layered itself onto the structure like sediment accumulating around a fossil. What began as function slowly became symbol. What began as knowledge slowly became reverence. Echoes are rarely precise. They warp, they stretch, they return later than expected. The Orion alignment, for example, does not insist on literal star worship. It suggests orientation and attempt to mirror cosmic order on Earth. As above, so below. Not as poetry, but as principle. The sky becomes a reference frame. The ground responds. This principle appears globally. Megalithic sites across continents share orientations, proportions and obsessions with celestial cycles. These similarities are often explained away as coincidence or independent invention. Yet coincidence grows less convincing as repetition increases. Echoes do not require contact. They require inheritance. Inheritance can be indirect. Knowledge survives not only through instruction, but through imitation. A technique used without understanding still carries traces of its origin. A structure repaired by later hands preserves earlier logic, even if the reasoning is forgotten. Over generations, purpose blurs, but form remains. I think often about how echoes persist in science itself. Old theories linger in language long after they are abandoned. Concepts echo through disciplines reshaped by new contexts. The pyramid feels like this, a theory written in stone no longer fully understood, yet still shaping the way we think about the past. Even skepticism becomes an echo. Resistance to alternative interpretations mirrors earlier resistance to new ideas across history. When evidence challenges comfort, silence responds. This pattern repeats itself reliably, not out of malice but out of human instinct. Echoes of fear, echoes of caution. The pyramid's endurance suggests that its builders understood echo intuitively. They may have known that their work would be misinterpreted, reattributed, mythologized. Rather than prevent this, they built something robust enough to survive misunderstanding. Meaning could change. Structure would not. Echoes are strongest when the original signal was clear. Precision leaves less room for decay. The pyramid's geometry remains legible even when context is lost. Angles still align, ratios still hold, measurements still return the same results. This consistency acts like a tuning fork across time, vibrating when examined carefully. Some nights when the wind moves gently across the plateau, it feels as if the structure itself is breathing. Not alive, but responsive. Stone expanding and contracting with temperature, subtly shifting stresses through its mass. A reminder that even the most rigid objects are dynamic when observed long enough. Echo also applies inward. As listeners, we respond to the pyramid not only intellectually but emotionally. It triggers something quiet, a sense of smallness, of continuity beyond self. This response is not taught. It emerges spontaneously as if the structure resonates with something internal. Perhaps that resonance is the true echo, not of builders but of observers across time. Humans encountering the same object, feeling similar unease, asking similar questions, separated by centuries yet connected by curiosity. The pyramid becomes a meeting point for minds that never meet. In this way, the pyramid is less a relic than a mirror. It reflects back our relationship with uncertainty. Each era projects its assumptions onto it, then learns from the resistance it offers. It does not confirm. It challenges gently, persistently. Echoes fade eventually, but only after immense time. The pyramid's echo still carries. It still disrupts neat explanations. It still invites reconsideration. That alone suggests that its signal was strong. Tonight, as you rest within this reflection, allow the echo to soften. You do not need to resolve it. Echoes are not meant to be captured. They are meant to be heard, then allowed to fade naturally into silence. In the end, observer, the echo reminds us that something once spoken here still reverberates, not loudly, not clearly, but enough to be felt. And that is often how the most important truths survive. Patterns reveal themselves slowly. They do not announce meaning, they invite recognition. In long study, the most convincing truths are rarely isolated facts, but arrangements. Relationships that repeat across scale, material, and time. When viewed this way, the Great Pyramid ceases to be a singular mystery and becomes part of a broader pattern, one that stretches beyond Egypt and into the deep architecture of human attention. Across the planet, ancient structures display a curious consistency. Megaliths align with solstices. Stone circles track lunar cycles. Pyramidal forms rise independently in distant cultures. These similarities are often explained as coincidence or parallel invention, yet coincidence weakens as repetition increases. At some point, repetition begins to look less like chance and more like inheritance. Inheritance does not require direct contact. It requires shared constraints and shared observation. The sky appears the same to all humans. Gravity behaves the same everywhere. Stone resists shaping in predictable ways. When civilizations respond to the same forces with similar solutions, patterns emerge naturally. But the precision of some alignments suggests more than casual observation. It suggests sustained measurement, patient correction, and long-term intent. The Great Pyramid participates in this pattern quietly. Its proportions echo ratios found elsewhere. Its orientation mirrors celestial order. Its mass stabilizes against time. It does not dominate the landscape through decoration or narrative. It dominates through consistency. Pattern thrives on consistency. In science, patterns are trusted more than anecdotes. A single anomaly may be dismissed, but a recurring relationship demands explanation. When geometry, astronomy, geology, and archaeology converge on similar conclusions, the mind begins to shift. Certainty dissolves into curiosity. I remember learning to recognize patterns not in textbooks, but in data that refused to settle. Charts layered atop one another. Measurements that repeated despite changes in method. Late nights when the simplest explanation failed and only structure remained. The pyramid evokes that same sensation, the feeling that something is coherently arranged, even if its purpose remains unclear. Patterns also operate in time. Civilizations tend to arise near water, flourish briefly, then decline as environments change. This cycle repeats with quiet regularity. What remains afterward is often stone foundations, monuments, markers, placed where permanence mattered most. The pyramid sits within this cycle not at its beginning, but at a hinge point between remembered and forgotten ages. The repetition of reset and rebuilding creates its own pattern. Knowledge survives unevenly. Some skills vanish entirely, others persist in altered form. What endures most reliably are methods tied to observation rather than tradition. Counting, measuring, aligning. These are not cultural preferences, they are responses to reality. The pyramid's builders, whoever they were, seem to have prioritized these responses. Rather than inscribing ideology, they embedded relationships. Rather than telling stories, they encoded orientation. Pattern replaces language because language decays. Pattern persists because it adapts. Even erosion follows pattern. Water sculpts predictably. Wind abrades consistently. Time leaves signatures that geologists learn to read like sentences. When those signatures conflict with accepted chronologies, it is not erosion that is mistaken, it is interpretation. Patterns do not argue, they repeat. Astronomy too obeys pattern. Precession cycles reliably. Stars return to familiar positions over vast spans. Alignments tied to these cycles are not symbolic accidents. They are calendars carved into space. The pyramid's relationship to Orion fits this logic. It does not prove intention alone, but it reinforces a pattern of sky-ground correspondence seen elsewhere. Patterns also explain resistance. When new interpretations threaten established frameworks, institutions hesitate. This is not conspiracy, it is inertia. Systems resist change because change introduces uncertainty. Yet history shows that understanding advances when patterns are followed rather than defended against. In long observation, I have learned that pattern recognition requires stillness. Noise obscures relationship. Only when distractions fade does structure emerge. The pyramid seems to demand this stillness. It resists hurried interpretation. It rewards patience. There is a personal pattern here as well. Humans repeatedly search for origin stories that center themselves. We prefer narratives where progress moves steadily forward, where the present represents the peak. The idea of prior advanced civilizations disrupts this comfort. It introduces humility. Pattern challenges pride. Yet humility is not diminishment. It is placement. To see ourselves as one iteration among many is to recognize continuity rather than isolation. The pyramid invites this perspective. It stands as proof that human capability is not unique to one era. It emerges, recedes, and re-emerges according to conditions. Patterns also operate inward. The mind itself seeks symmetry, closure, explanation. When these are denied, it experiences discomfort. Sleep narratives succeed not by resolving tension, but by softening it. The pyramid's unresolved pattern allows the mind to relax into uncertainty without fear. Tonight, the universe whispers again through repetition rather than revelation. It reminds us that meaning does not always arrive as answers. Sometimes it arrives as alignment, the quiet satisfaction of seeing connections without needing conclusions. As you drift deeper, let the pattern remain unfinished. You do not need to solve it. Patterns exist whether they are recognized or not. They do not require belief, only presence. In the end, listener pattern is the language of the cosmos. It speaks softly, persistently across stone and sky. And when we listen without urgency, it becomes something we can rest within. Warnings are rarely loud. In nature, the most important signals arrive quietly embedded in patterns that only reveal themselves over time. A slight shift in orbit, a slow change in climate, a resonance that lingers longer than expected. The Great Pyramid feels like this kind of warning, not a declaration, not a prophecy, but a structure that suggests awareness of forces larger than any single civilization. To recognize a warning is not to expect disaster, but to acknowledge vulnerability. Civilizations often imagine themselves permanent while they are thriving. Stability creates confidence. Confidence dulls attention. The pyramid stands as a counterweight to that instinct, a reminder carved in stone that endurance requires humility more than power. There is something restrained about the pyramid's message, if it has one at all. It does not depict kings triumphing over enemies. It does not celebrate conquest or expansion. Instead, it withdraws from narrative, entirely offering proportion, alignment, and mass. These are not symbols of dominance, they are symbols of balance. Balance implies awareness of imbalance. Builders who think in terms of alignment understand deviation. Those who measure cycles understand disruption. The pyramid's relationship with celestial mechanics suggests familiarity with repetition, and return with the idea that conditions change predictably, even when outcomes do not. This awareness itself can be read as a warning: what has happened before can happen again. I have often noticed that the most unsettling aspect of the pyramid is not what it contains, but what it omits. No instructions, no inscriptions explaining purpose, no assurances that the future will understand the past. This absence feels intentional. A warning that knowledge does not survive simply because it exists. It survives because conditions allow it to be carried forward. In geology, warning signs precede collapse quietly. Stress accumulates invisibly before release. Fault lines remain still until they do not. When rupture occurs, it feels sudden, yet it was prepared by years of pressure. Civilizations follow similar dynamics. They do not fail because of one event, but because of long periods of unaddressed imbalance. The pyramid's endurance across climatic upheavals suggests that its builders were attentive to such pressures. They may have lived through instability or inherited memory of it. They may have seen coastlines vanish, weather patterns, reorganized resources disappear. Such experiences would alter how one thinks about permanence. Rather than building higher, they built deeper into bedrock, into geometry, into cycles that outlast political power. This is not fear-based construction. It is adaptation. A warning encoded not in words, but in design choices. Modern observers often interpret ancient warnings as superstition or myth. Flood stories are dismissed as allegory. Cycles are reduced to coincidence. Yet when myth aligns with geology and geology aligns with astronomy, dismissal becomes more difficult. The pyramid sits at this intersection, quietly reinforcing the idea that history is not a straight line. Warnings also exist in resistance. The reluctance to explore hidden chambers, the hesitation to revise timelines, the preference for closure over inquiry. These behaviors mirror patterns seen before major paradigm shifts. When systems feel threatened, they tighten. Silence increases. Innovation slows. This too is a warning not from the past, but from the present. I've watched this dynamic unfold in other fields. Data emerges that challenges assumptions. At first it is ignored, then debated, then reframed. Only later is it integrated, often after resistance has exhausted itself. The pyramid seems to exist perpetually at that early stage where evidence is present, but assimilation remains incomplete. There is a subtle danger in assuming that advanced knowledge belongs exclusively to modernity. It creates blind spots. It encourages underestimation of past intelligence and overconfidence in current resilience. The pyramid warns against this by existing at a level of sophistication that refuses to fit neatly into chronological hierarchy. This is not a warning of doom. It is a warning of forgetting. Forgetting that environments change. Forgetting that knowledge can be lost. Forgetting that survival often depends less on innovation than on continuity. The pyramid suggests that earlier societies may have understood this more clearly than we do. The idea of reset carries warning implicitly. If civilization has reset before, then progress is not guaranteed. Comfort is temporary. Stability is conditional. This does not negate achievement, but it contextualizes it. It reminds us that adaptation, not dominance, determines longevity. Even the pyramid's silence can be read as cautionary. Silence forces interpretation. It denies certainty. It resists appropriation by any single narrative. In doing so, it prevents misuse of its meaning. A spoken warning can be misquoted. A written one can be edited. A silent one must be approached carefully. There is also a personal warning embedded here. Humans tend to seek answers quickly to resolve uncertainty rather than sit with it. Yet the pyramid rewards patience. It reveals more when approached slowly, when studied without the expectation of closure. This approach mirrors how one must engage with complex systems gently, attentively, without forcing conclusions. The warning then is not about the pyramid itself. It is about how we relate to the unknown, whether we rush to explain or allow ourselves to observe, whether we prioritize control or understanding, whether we see history as a finished story or an ongoing process. At night, under a sky largely unchanged since the pyramid was first aligned, these questions feel less abstract. Stars continue their cycles without concern for human narratives. Precession advances, seasons shift, the planet breathes. The warning is simply that we are part of this system, not outside it. Acknowledging this does not require anxiety. It requires perspective. The universe is not hostile. It is indifferent. Indifference is not cruelty. It is consistency. And consistency allows preparation if we choose to observe carefully. The pyramid may be a reminder left by those who understood this indifference and built accordingly. Not to frighten, but to orient. To suggest that alignment with earth, with sky, with time is wiser than defiance. As you listen, now allow this warning to soften rather than sharpen. It is not a call to action. It is an invitation to awareness, to humility, to the recognition that understanding unfolds best when we stop insisting on certainty. In the end, a traveller, the warning is gentle. It says only, this civilizations come and go, but patterns remain. Stone remembers what people forget. And those who listen quietly tend to endure longer than those who speak the loudest. The sky has always been humanity's first archive. Long before writing, before stone was shaped deliberately, eyes turned upward and learned to measure what returned. Stars rise and set with a patience that invites attention. They teach rhythm without instruction. Night after night, the sky repeats itself just enough to be trusted, yet never so perfectly that it can be ignored. Standing beneath the same sky that once arched above the builders of the Great Pyramid, it becomes clear that architecture and astronomy were never separate pursuits. To build on Earth without reference to the sky is to build without orientation. The pyramid's alignment suggests that its creators treated the heavens not as decoration but as framework. True north is not visible. It must be inferred from motion stars circling a point that does not move. To determine it accurately requires long observation, patience across seasons, and an understanding that small errors compound over distance. The pyramid's precision implies that such observation was not casual. It was practiced, refined, and trusted. The sky also teaches scale. Human lifetimes are brief against stellar cycles. Precession unfolds over 26,000 years, shifting the celestial backdrop slowly enough that it escapes casual notice. To recognize it is to accept deep time. To encode it in stone is to acknowledge that the future will belong to others. This is where the pyramid's relationship to Orion becomes meaningful. Not as mythology alone, but as alignment to a moment in the sky that mattered. The belt stars trace a pattern mirrored on the ground, suggesting that the builders understood correspondence between above and below. This is not worship, it is mapping. Mapping the sky onto Earth implies intent beyond ceremony. It suggests calibration, a desire to anchor structure to cycles that persist regardless of human continuity. Stars do not obey dynasties, they outlast languages. Aligning to them is an act of humility, a recognition that permanence belongs elsewhere. I have spent nights with telescopes where time seems to loosen its grip. Tracking objects that emitted light before human history began has a quieting effect. It becomes difficult to insist on modern exceptionalism when confronted with such continuity. The pyramid evokes a similar humility, but through stone rather than light. Ancient observers did not need advanced instruments to notice the sky's order. They needed attention. Repetition teaches pattern. Pattern teaches prediction. Prediction becomes power, not over nature but within it. Knowing when floods come, when seasons shift, when stars return gives a civilization rhythm. The sky also carries warning in its constancy. Changes are subtle until they are not. Axial tilt shifts. Orbits vary. Insolation changes climate slowly then suddenly. Those attentive to the sky might sense instability long before it manifests on Earth. Aligning monuments to celestial cycles may have been a way to remember such lessons. There is a reason so many ancient structures track solstices and equinoxes. These moments mark balance points thresholds between growth and decline. They are reminders that extremes follow predictably from stability. The pyramid's orientation places it within this language of balance, even if its specific purpose remains unknown. The sky also invites myth, but myth need not contradict science. Myth is how pattern becomes narrative. When stars are linked to gods, it is not superstition alone. It is memory made portable, a way to transmit orientation through story when measurement tools are lost. Egyptian mythology associated Orion with Osiris, a god of death and renewal. This association aligns naturally with astronomical cycles' disappearance followed by return. If the pyramid echoes Orion, it may be less about deity than about continuity. Death, followed by re-emergence. Collapse, followed by rebuilding. In this light, the sky becomes a teacher of resets. Stars vanish seasonally, then return. Civilizations may do the same. The difference is scale. One happens predictably. The other feels catastrophic. Aligning to the sky may have been a way to accept this difference to normalize loss within larger cycles. Modern society often treats the sky as backdrop rather than guide. Light pollution erases stars. Timekeeping becomes artificial. Seasons lose significance. In doing so, we lose a language that once grounded civilizations within natural rhythms. The pyramid reminds us that such grounding was once essential. I think often of how calm the night sky feels despite its violence. Supernovae explode, galaxies collide, radiation travels silently across space, yet from Earth, stars appear steady, reassuring. The pyramid captures this same paradox, immense forces held within quiet form. Sky and stone share patience. Neither rushes explanation. Both reveal themselves slowly, rewarding sustained attention. To align with them is to slow oneself to adopt a longer view. The pyramid seems to ask for this pace. There is also an emotional resonance here. Looking up at the stars reduces anxiety. It places personal concerns within a wider context. Ancient builders likely experienced this same effect. Their monuments may reflect not only technical knowledge but psychological insight. Perhaps the pyramid was built as a stabilizer, not physically but culturally. A fixed point against which change could be measured. A reminder that no matter how unstable the world becomes, certain patterns endure. The sky returns, stone remains. This does not require advanced technology. It requires attention, patience, and respect for forces larger than oneself. These qualities may be rarer than tools. They may be what truly distinguishes civilizations that endure from those that vanish. As night deepens, the sky above the pyramid remains largely unchanged from the one its builders saw. Orion still rises. Polaris still anchors direction. Precession continues its slow turn. Time flows indifferent yet orderly. Tonight allow the sky to do what it has always done. Let it widen perspective. Let it soften urgency. Let it remind you that understanding is not always immediate, and that meaning often arrives through alignment rather than explanation. Earth remembers in ways that language cannot. Beneath every monument lies a record older than names written in pressure mineral and slow movement. When studying the Great Pyramid, attention often drifts upward to stars' alignments and celestial cycles, but the ground beneath it tells an equally patient story. Stone rests on stone not by accident, but by negotiation with gravity, density, and time. The Giza Plateau is not a neutral surface. It is a geological statement. Bedrock here is stable, ancient, and resistant to seismic distortion. Choosing this location was not symbolic alone, it was practical. Builders who understand Earth think in terms of load, stress, and endurance. They ask where stone will remain quiet across centuries, where ground will not shift under memory's weight. I have often found that the most overlooked intelligence in ancient construction is environmental. Climate, water, soil, and stone dictate what survives. The pyramid's survival suggests that its builders read Earth carefully, not as scenery but as system. They did not impose structure onto the land, they integrated with it. Water once shaped this region. Long before desert sands arrived, rain-carved channels and softened stone, geological layers preserve this history without bias. When water retreats, it leaves behind clues in erosion patterns, in mineral deposits, in the quiet rounding of edges that wind alone cannot produce. Earth keeps these records faithfully. The Sphinx bears such marks openly. Its weathered body tells of prolonged rainfall, not fleeting storms. This evidence does not accuse chronology, it simply expands it. Earth does not care when civilizations prefer to begin their stories. It records only what happened. If monumental construction occurred near or atop earlier landscapes, it would reflect environmental knowledge inherited or rediscovered. Builders working after a reset would encounter relics shaped by climates they no longer knew. Restoration would blend with creation. Earth becomes collaborator rather than canvas. Granite transported from distant quarries tells another Earth-centered story. Moving such mass requires understanding terrain friction, slope, and seasonal variation. Rivers rise and fall, ground hardens and softens, timing becomes essential. The Earth dictates when movement is possible and when it is not. In this way, construction becomes dialogue. Stone speaks through resistance. Earth responds through gravity. The pyramid's form suggests that this dialogue was respectful, attentive, and refined. There is little evidence of brute force improvisation. Instead, we see anticipation choices made with long-term stability in mind. Earth also enforces humility. No matter how precise design may be, material behavior introduces uncertainty. Temperature shifts expand stone. Moisture weakens joints. Time redistributes stress. The pyramid's endurance implies that these factors were considered, not ignored. This is not luck. It is environmental fluency. I have walked landscapes where ancient structures collapsed because they fought their surroundings. Foundations cracked. Walls leaned. Nature reclaimed quickly what was built carelessly. The pyramid avoids this fate by aligning with Earth's tendencies rather than opposing them. Its mass settles evenly. Its angles distribute force. Its base rests patiently. Earth operates on cycles. Sediment accumulates. Mountains rise, then erode. Deserts replace forests. Ice advances, retreats. Civilizations embedded within these cycles must adapt or vanish. The pyramid's placement and construction suggest awareness of this rhythm, a willingness to build within cycles rather than beyond them. The idea of reset becomes tangible here. When climates change rapidly, societies face choices: simplify or collapse, preserve or abandon. What is carried forward is rarely complexity. It is orientation. Knowledge that aligns with Earth tends to survive longer than knowledge that ignores it. Perhaps the pyramid was built not to resist Earth's resets, but to remain legible through them. Its geometry remains meaningful even when context is lost. Its orientation remains accurate even when language changes. Earth preserves what is compatible with its processes. Modern observers often underestimate ancient environmental intelligence. We assume technology defines capability. Yet technology detached from environment fails quickly. The builders of the pyramid appear to have prioritized understanding Earth first, tools second. This inversion may explain their success. Earth also shapes memory through burial. Sand covers what no longer fits. Wind exposes what endures. Over time, landscapes curate their own archives. The pyramid's partial burial and re-emergence illustrate this process. It was not lost, it was stored. I find comfort in this. Earth does not erase indiscriminately. It filters. It keeps what integrates well and releases what does not. The pyramid passed this filter repeatedly. That alone suggests alignment with deeper principles than political ambition. This alignment extends inward. Humans respond emotionally to grounded structures. Massive stone evokes stability. Balanced proportions calm the nervous system. Environmental harmony is not only structural, it is psychological. The pyramid may have functioned as an anchor for collective attention, offering reassurance during times of change. Earth's silence complements the sky's motion. One grounds, the other guides. Together they frame human experience between permanence and flux. The pyramid stands at this intersection, mediating between what moves and what stays. Tonight as you listen, imagine the weight beneath the structure. Imagine bedrock absorbing pressure slowly without complaint. Imagine stone settling into equilibrium over centuries. Earth is not passive. It participates continuously, adjusting, redistributing, supporting. Understanding this invites a quieter respect. Not everything ancient needs explanation. Some things persist because they fit. The pyramid fits Earth. That may be its most enduring achievement. As your thoughts slow, let the idea of Earth as memory settle gently. It remembers for us when we cannot. It holds what survives, resets, and releases what does not. The pyramid rests within that memory, patient and unchanged, a reminder that endurance begins with listening. Every civilization believes it is moving forward, yet history suggests something quieter and more unsettling. Movement is often circular. Ideas return. Fears resurface. Knowledge fades, then reappears in altered form. When examining the Great Pyramid through this lens, it no longer feels like an isolated achievement, but like a waypoint, a structure placed deliberately along a recurring human path. Return does not mean repetition without memory. It means fragments survive. Techniques erode into myth. Measurements become symbols. Precision dissolves into reverence. When later cultures encounter what remains, they reinterpret rather than recreate. The pyramid, enduring beyond its builders, becomes a mirror in which each era sees its own assumptions reflected. I have often wondered how many times humanity has stood before ruins and mistaken inheritance for invention. When tools are rediscovered rather than developed, their origins are obscured. Returned feels like progress because memory is incomplete. The pyramid may belong to such a cycle built by minds already returning from something older. Consider how abruptly ancient Egyptian civilization appears in the archaeological record. Writing systems mature quickly. Architecture arrives refined. Mathematics is already practical and symbolic. There is little evidence of prolonged experimentation. This suggests not a beginning, but a continuation, a return to order after disruption. Disruption leaves few traces of nuance. Catastrophe compresses history. Floods, climate shifts, or social collapse remove layers of complexity, preserving only what is essential. When stability returns, rebuilding begins from a reduced template. Sophistication appears suddenly because it is remembered, not invented. The pyramid fits this pattern. It does not look like a prototype. It looks like a culmination. Its builders did not test small ideas. They executed large ones confidently. This confidence implies precedent. It suggests they were not inventing methods, but applying them. Return also reshapes purpose. Structures built after a reset often carry multiple functions. They preserve knowledge, anchor identity, and signal continuity. The pyramid may have served as all three. A place where memory could be externalized into geometry when language proved fragile. Modern science often frames progress as linear accumulation, yet even science experiences returns. Forgotten hypotheses resurface. Discarded data gains relevance. Cycles of skepticism and acceptance repeat. In this sense, the pyramid's mystery is not anomalous, it is familiar. When societies return from collapse, they prioritize stability. They seek alignment with land, sky, and inherited patterns. The pyramid's precise orientation and environmental integration reflect such priorities. It is not extravagant, it is deliberate. I think of long nights studying old charts, tracing ideas that vanish from textbooks, only to reappear decades later under new terminology. Knowledge rarely disappears entirely. It hides, waiting for conditions that allow recognition. Stone, unlike paper, endures long enough to enable such recognition across millennia. Return also involves humility. Later builders do not always understand what they inherit. They adapt without comprehension. They restore without context. The Egyptians may have done this with earlier structures reshaping relics to fit contemporary narratives. The Sphinx offers such a possibility, a face recarved, a body retained. This does not diminish Egyptian achievement. It reframes it. Restoration requires skill. Interpretation requires insight. But it acknowledges that creativity often operates within boundaries set by the past. Return is not failure. It is continuity under constraint. There is comfort in this perspective. It means human intelligence is resilient even if fragile. It survives through fragments, stories, alignments, and stone. Each return rebuilds differently but draws from a shared reservoir of observation and experience. The pyramid may represent a conscious attempt to stabilize return itself. By encoding orientation into architecture, its builders ensured that future societies could re-anchor themselves even if context was lost. True north does not change. Orion returns. Geometry persists. This is not prophecy. It is practicality. If you expect disruption, you leave markers. You build references that do not depend on language. You assume memory will fracture and design accordingly. The pyramid feels like such a marker. Modern civilization, confident in data storage and redundancy, may underestimate how quickly complexity can vanish. Earth has demonstrated repeatedly that stability is conditional. Ice ages, droughts, and sea level changes erase assumptions. Return follows collapse as reliably as collapse follows excess. Understanding this tempers arrogance. It invites preparation rather than denial. The pyramid's existence suggests that at least one civilization understood this deeply enough to act. Whether Egyptian or earlier matters less than the insight itself. Return is not dramatic. It is quiet. People rebuild homes, re-establish rituals, reinterpret ruins. Over generations, origins blur. What remains are structures that continue to function as anchors long after their creators are forgotten. The Great Pyramid continues to anchor attention. Scientists measure it. Travelers contemplate it. Cultures project meaning onto it. This persistence is not accidental. It reflects successful design across cycles of return. As you listen, allow this idea to settle without urgency. Humanity has been here before, not in detail but in pattern. Questions repeat because conditions repeat. Curiosity returns because uncertainty returns. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not as a hidden machine or secret knowledge, but as rhythm, collapse and renewal, forgetting and rediscovery, silence and inquiry. Tonight the universe whispers again, not with answers, but with reassurance. Return is not loss, it is continuation under new names. It is all right to not understand every origin, because understanding itself is part of the cycle. Rest now in that continuity. You are not outside history's loops. You are within them, and like those before you, you are returning thought by thought toward a deeper quiet. There comes a point in every long inquiry when accumulation stops helping. Evidence stacks, neatly patterns, repeat questions, sharpen, and still the center remains quiet. This is the moment reflection begins, not as surrender, but as a different kind of attention. When studying the Great Pyramid, long enough facts no longer demand conquest. They ask to be held gently without forcing them to confess more than they offer. I have learned this after many nights surrounded by instruments that hum softly while doing nothing dramatic. Data scrolls, readings stabilize, nothing happens, and yet in that stillness understanding deepens. The pyramid induces the same effect. It refuses urgency. It slows the observer until the mind adjusts to a longer wavelength. Reflection begins with admitting uncertainty without anxiety. The builders' names may be lost. Their tools may be misidentified. Their intentions may never be fully recovered. This absence does not weaken the structure's meaning. It strengthens it. The pyramid becomes less about authorship and more about relationship between humans, earth and sky. When we ask who built it, we often mean who deserves credit. Reflection reframes the question. Who understood enough to leave something that lasts, who accepted that explanation might fail but alignment could endure? These questions move away from ego and toward insight. The Great Pyramid reflects us back to ourselves. Each generation approaches it with its own assumptions. Early explorers saw treasure, Victorians saw engineering puzzles, modern scientists see data sets, alternative researchers see suppressed histories. All of these say as much about the observer as about the monument. This is not deception. It is projection. Large ambiguous structures invite meaning. They become screens for cultural priorities. The pyramid's silence allows this. It does not argue. It does not clarify. It waits. I find this waiting instructive. In a world saturated with immediate answers, the pyramid models restraint. It suggests that some things gain power by not resolving quickly. That mystery can stabilize attention rather than disturb it. Reflection also invites comparison. How many modern structures are built to endure beyond their context? How many align with forces that outlast language? Most are optimized for short-term utility, not long-term legibility. The pyramid seems optimized for time itself. This realization changes how one evaluates advanced. Advancement may not mean complexity or speed. It may mean selecting principles that survive disruption. Geometry, orientation, mass, simplicity executed precisely. These qualities resist obsolescence. The pyramid's internal emptiness becomes significant here. Its chambers are sparse, its passages narrow. There is no clutter. This restraint feels intentional. It avoids reliance on decoration that could mislead future interpreters. Instead, it emphasizes structure and alignment features that remain meaningful even when symbols fade. In reflection, one notices how often modern narratives insist on either total explanation or total dismissal. The pyramid resists both. It is neither fully understood nor easily ignored. This tension keeps inquiry alive without demanding closure. I have felt this same tension when examining old data that does not fit prevailing models. The temptation is to discard it. Reflection asks instead, what if the model is incomplete? The pyramid may represent such data at civilizational scale. There is also an emotional component to reflection that is rarely acknowledged. Long exposure to deep time humbles personal concerns. Standing before something that has outlived empires softens the need to be correct. One becomes content to be attentive. The pyramid encourages this contentment. Its proportions are calming. Its symmetry reduces cognitive strain. It doesn't overwhelm with detail. It invites quiet observation. This may be one of its least discussed functions. Perhaps the pyramid was designed to induce reflection intentionally, not as a place of answers, but as a device for slowing thought. A cultural instrument that shifts consciousness toward patience. In this sense, it operates more like a telescope than a tomb, expanding perspective rather than containing remains. Reflection also exposes limits of conflict-driven narratives. Arguments over who built the pyramid often mirror modern anxieties about authority, control, and legitimacy. While these concerns are real, they may obscure quieter insights. The structure's endurance does not depend on resolving contemporary disputes. This does not excuse secrecy or dismissal of inquiry. It contextualizes them. Power dynamics shape access to evidence, but evidence itself persists independently. Stone outlasts institutions. Reflection trusts this asymmetry. I think often of how little we truly need to know to live responsibly. Orientation matters more than origin. Understanding cycles matters more than names. Preparing for change matters more than assigning credit. The pyramid seems aligned with these priorities. In reflecting on resets, one notices that civilizations rarely collapse because of ignorance alone. They collapse from rigidity, from failure to adapt, from insisting that current explanations must remain permanent. The pyramid's ambiguity may be its adaptive strength. It accommodates reinterpretation. Reflection also allows appreciation without ownership. One can admire the pyramid without claiming it for any single narrative. This openness may be the most respectful stance available to distant observers. As the night deepens, thoughts naturally slow. Reflection becomes less analytical and more atmospheric. Ideas drift rather than argue. This is appropriate. The pyramid was not built for debate, it was built for time. Time does not resolve arguments, it reframes them. What seemed urgent becomes trivial, what seemed obscure becomes central. Reflection aligns thought with this process rather than resisting it. You may notice now that the need for answers has softened. Questions remain, but they no longer press. This is not apathy, it is equilibrium, a state where curiosity coexists with acceptance. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. This phrase is often misunderstood as anti-intellectual. In truth, it is deeply scientific. Observation precedes explanation. Sometimes it replaces it. The Great Pyramid stands as a long-term observation instrument. It measures not only stars and Earth, but human response to the unknown. Across millennia, that response has been consistent, or speculation-reflection. Tonight, allow reflection to complete its work. Let conclusions remain provisional. Let silence have its turn. Understanding does not always arrive as clarity. Sometimes it arrives as peace. It's all right to not understand. As inquiry fades, something quieter takes its place. The mind, having traced patterns across stone sky and time, begins to loosen its grip. This is the descent not into ignorance, but into rest. After long reflection, understanding no longer demands movement. It settles like dust returning to the ground after a distant collapse. The Great Pyramid does not conclude its story. It withdraws from it. Standing unchanged while questions circulate, it models a kind of patience rarely practiced. The longer one studies it, the more its silence becomes instructive. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is the universe thinking without hurry, without explanation. In my own work, there are moments when instruments are powered down and notes remain unfinished. Not because answers were found, but because continuing would add noise rather than clarity. These moments are not failures, they are thresholds. Beyond them lies rest, and sometimes insight arrives only after surrender. The pyramid invites such surrender. Its scale dwarfs urgency, its age dissolves deadlines. Standing before it, whether physically or in imagination, the nervous system slows, breathing deepens, thoughts stretch into longer arcs. This physiological response is not accidental. Humans are tuned to perceive stability as safety. As civilizations rise and fall, certain forms remain calming. Symmetry reassures, mass anchors attention. Orientation provides direction when context is lost. The pyramid carries all three. It does not demand belief, it offers containment. This containment is what allows descent. When the mind feels held, it can rest. When questions feel suspended rather than unresolved, sleep approaches naturally. The pyramid functions here not as an object of study, but as a psychological landscape, one that absorbs excess curiosity without rejecting it. Consider how erosion works. Wind and water do not destroy abruptly. They smooth, they soften edges. Over time, sharp features become gentle. Inquiry follows a similar process. Intense questioning sharpens thought initially, but prolonged exposure to mystery rounds it into acceptance. I have noticed this during long nights under open sky. At first, constellations demand identification. Later, they simply glow. Names fade. Measurement ceases. Presence remains. The pyramid encourages this same transition from analysis to awareness. Descent into sleep does not mean abandoning reason. It means letting reason rest. The universe does not require constant interrogation. It continues regardless. Aligning with its pace rather than imposing ours is a form of wisdom rarely acknowledged. The builders of enduring structures may have understood this intuitively. They did not encode answers. They encoded conditions for reflection. Conditions that allow future observers to find their own equilibrium. As thoughts slow, notice how the body responds. Muscles release, shoulders settle, breathing synchronizes with imagined rhythms, the slow turn of stars, the imperceptible settling of stone. These rhythms are ancient. They predate language. The pyramid rests within these rhythms, not resisting them. It neither accelerates nor decays noticeably within a human lifetime. It teaches that durability is quiet, that endurance does not announce itself. In this quiet, distinctions blur. Ancient and modern feel less opposed. Builder and observer feel connected. The questions that once seemed urgent now feel distant, almost unnecessary. This is not disinterest. It is saturation. The mind has absorbed enough. Sleep approaches not as interruption, but as continuation. Dreaming is another form of pattern recognition free from conscious constraint. It allows associations that waking thought resists. Perhaps this too is part of the pyramid's long influence to seed dreams across cultures and eras. As you descend, there is no need to carry conclusions. They can remain where they are resting beside unanswered questions. The universe is comfortable with incompleteness. It operates effectively without final explanations. Somewhere beyond our reach, something ancient still moves, not as a hidden force, but as ongoing process. Gravity remembers. Light travels. Stone holds. Time flows. None of this requires witness. Yet here you are aware of it, participating simply by noticing. This participation is enough. You do not need to solve what came before. You do not need to predict what comes after. Alignment, not mastery, is the invitation. As the descent continues, thoughts grow less distinct. Words soften. Images blur gently. This is appropriate. Precision has served its purpose. Now comes rest. If a final image remains, let it be simple stone under stars, unmoving yet alive with implication. The sky turning slowly overhead, the earth steady beneath. Between them, human awareness easing into quiet. Tonight the universe whispers again, not to instruct, but to reassure. There is time. There is continuity. There is no demand to remain awake. Sleep, traveller. The cosmos will keep watch. The night completes its arc not with answers, but with equilibrium. After moving through stone and sky erosion and memory, the mind reaches a still point where curiosity no longer pulls forward. It hovers weightless, suspended between knowing and not needing to know. This is where endings naturally occur, not as closures but as gentle releases. The Great Pyramid remains as it always has, unconcerned with our arrival or departure. It has witnessed countless awakenings and just as many descents into sleep. Empires rose while it stood quietly. Languages formed and vanished while its stone stayed aligned. Even the questions we ask today are repetitions, echoes shaped by different vocabularies. In this way, the pyramid teaches a final lesson that often goes unnoticed. Knowledge is cyclical. Each generation believes it approaches the mystery for the first time, yet the structure has already absorbed those inquiries. It does not resist interpretation, but it does not yield to it either. It allows meaning to pass through without altering its core. I have felt something similar at the end of long investigations. Papers stacked, data archived, instruments calibrated one last time before rest. There is a moment when continuing feels unnecessary, not because the truth was captured, but because the system feels complete enough to pause. That pause is not ignorance, it is integration. The universe operates through integration. Particles do not rush. Orbits repeat patiently. Light travels immense distances without urgency. Even catastrophic events, impacts, collapses, extinctions become quiet layers in time once their energy dissipates. What remains afterward is structure, pattern, and silence. The pyramid exists in that aftermath state. Whatever urgency surrounded its construction has long since faded. What survives is form, orientation, balance. These qualities speak across millennia more clearly than any inscription could. They communicate stability in a language the nervous system understands instinctively. As the listener rests, awareness shifts inward. The external mystery no longer demands resolution. Instead, it mirrors internal processes the way memories sediment, the way thoughts erode into impressions, the way meaning persists even when detail is lost. This mirroring is why ancient monuments continue to matter. They externalize inner architecture. They give shape to the human need for continuity in a world defined by change. In their presence, the mind recognizes itself reflected in stone. There is comfort in this recognition. It reduces isolation. It suggests that uncertainty is shared across time, that not knowing has always been part of being human, and that entire civilizations functioned and found meaning without complete explanations. The final state is not revelation, but permission. Permission to rest without clarity. Permission to exist without resolution. Permission to trust that unanswered questions do not weaken reality. They enrich it. As sleep deepens, the pyramid becomes less an object and more a sensation mass without edges presence, without narrative. The stars above blur into slow motion. The earth below feels steady. Between them, consciousness drifts gently, no longer pulled by inquiry. This drifting is safe. It follows rhythms older than fear. The body knows how to sleep. The mind knows how to let go. The universe does not require vigilance. Somewhere long after this moment, new researchers will return to the same stones with new tools and new theories. They will speak with confidence. They will debate. They will feel close to understanding. And the pyramid will remain unchanged, holding space for those thoughts as it has always done. That continuity is reassuring. It suggests that nothing essential is at risk if one individual rests. The cosmos does not pause when eyes close. It continues smoothly, carrying both knowledge and ignorance forward together. As the final thoughts loosen, language itself becomes unnecessary. Concepts dissolve into sensation. The distinction between ancient and modern fades. What remains is a shared present stone sky breath silence. In this silence there is no pressure to conclude. Endings are human conveniences. The universe prefers continuity. Sleep is not an end but a transition, one more cycle, within an infinite series of cycles. If there is a final understanding to carry into rest, it is simple. You are not separate from the mystery. You are one of its expressions. Your questions, your doubts, your wonder, all of them belong. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only observed. Some structures aren't meant to explain, only to endure. And some nights aren't meant for answers, only for rest. Tonight the universe whispers again. Not with urgency, not with instruction, just with presence. We've reached the edge of tonight's story, traveller. The dust has settled, the echoes have softened, and the vast silence returns to the stone. What we touched together was never meant to be fully uncovered, only gently approached, like a lantern lowered into a chamber too old for names. The Great Pyramid still stands unchanged by our questions. It does not confirm or deny. It simply endures, holding time the way gravity holds light. Somewhere within its angles and alignments, memory rests not as answers but as presence. The universe is like that. It continues whether we understand it or not. Stars burn, stones age, civilizations pass, and meaning drifts quietly between them. The past is not finished. It waits patient and incomplete, asking nothing from us except attention. In moments like this, smallness is not frightening. It is comforting. To know we are brief visitors in a vast design, allowed to wonder without obligation to conclude. Entropy moves forward, yet memory lingers. Silence expands, yet something within it listens back. Some truths don't demand answers. They ask only that we sit with them, breathing slowly, aware of how little we need to hold. As the night deepens, let the questions remain where they belong, among the stars beneath the sand, inside the quiet architecture of time. You don't have to carry them further. Rest now, observer. The story does not end here. The universe will keep watch.